Okay, is that working? All right, here we are. AP Psych. This is talk about memory, and it's not a comprehensive talk about memory, just a review of some of the difficult or confusing terms. So, if you want the comprehensive thing, you got to go back and look at all your notes and get all the terms. First, I want to talk about two people that are important in the memory unit. One is Ebbinghaus, Hermann Ebbinghaus, and he was one of the pioneers in researching memory. He used the nonsense syllables, which were those three-letter long syllables. They weren't words. They were like T-U-S would be a nonsense syllable, for example. And by having people memorize these and testing how long they could remember them and stuff, he came up with several important ideas. One, this big rule of Ebbinghaus's had to do with rehearsal, and it was that rehearsal, the more you rehearse, the more you remember. Surprise, surprise. So that was one rule he came up with. He also noticed something called the serial positioning effect. So that if people memorize a list of things, they tended to remember the first things in the list and the last things in the list best. And if they only remember the first things best, that's called the primacy effect. And if they only remember the last things best, that's called the recency effect. Recency as in the most recent, like the end of the list, the most recent. So that's Ebbinghaus. Another person with memory is Loftus, Elizabeth Loftus, and she did a lot of research in the 90s on childhood memories of childhood abuse, sexual abuse. And one thing she found out was that it was very difficult to tell the difference between children who were abused and who were not abused. Children had a lot of false memories. They were very susceptible to the misinformation effect. So it's just very difficult to tell. And so Loftus did that research. She did what she called it was memory reconstruction, how our mind reconstructs memories and how they're not always accurate. Am I still here? Okay, I think the screen went blank for a minute. All right, there's three things. Those are the people. I want to talk about three things that are biological that have to do with memory. The first one that students get confused about usually is long-term potentiation. So with long-term potentiation, we're talking about, let's see, where is this? What happens to a neuron? So if this blue thing is a neuron, you got all kinds of information coming into the neuron from all these little arms, and then it sends information down, and there's stuff that goes out the neuron, out these other arms. So whenever we remember something, it's traveling through our brain down these neurons. There's billions of them, right? So when we rehearse something, like by looking at flashcards, we're going up and down a path of neurons in and out of our memory. And the more we rehearse, the more we go up and down the path, the easier it becomes to go up and down the path. So the neural path becomes easier to travel up and down. So that's called long-term potentiation. So the potential for the neuron to fire in the long term is enhanced. So long-term potentiation. You like that amateur graphic there? Okay. There's two parts of the brain we need to know that are involved with memory. And here we have another amateur graphic. This is a brain. And in the back part, down here is our cerebellum. And our cerebellum has a lot to do with balance and movement. So the types of memory that are stored there are implicit memories of motor skills. So learning to ride a bike, learning how to write with your pencil. Those sorts of memories are stored in the cerebellum. So that's implicit memories, cerebellum. Explicit memories are stored in the hippocampus, which is right in here inside in the center of the brain. And the hippocampus processes explicit memories and helps us remember explicit memories. So explicit memories are facts and general knowledge. That's semantic. So there's two types of explicit memories. Semantic is facts and general knowledge. And episodic, which is episode. So episodes, personal life experiences. So I remember what I ate for lunch yesterday. I remember a trip I took to the Grand Canyon. Those are episodes. So those sorts of memories are processed by the hippocampus. Explicit memories, hippocampus. All right, I'm going to pause there for a minute. Okay, here we go. That was the first part. Now we're back. I want to talk about 3 ways that memories are sort of linked and stored that make it easier to recall them later. So one way is that we have mood congruent memories. Another is that we have state dependent memories. And another is that we have context cues or context effects. So a mood congruent memory, when our memories are stored, they tend to be linked by mood. So when we're in a really good mood, we remember other things from other times that we're also in a really good mood. So if your team wins the state volleyball championship and you're just on cloud 9, you will remember other times you felt really good. Maybe you'll remember the time you met some boy you really liked, or maybe you'll remember a family vacation that was a lot of fun. So this mood congruent memory, what happens is whatever mood we're in tends to be perpetuated because we continue to remember other things in that mood. So it could work against you also. If you're depressed, you might remember other times you were depressed, and because you're doing that, your depression might be prolonged. Another way that memories are linked, it's called state-dependent memory. So whatever state of mind you're in when you learn something, you'll remember it most easily when you're also in that state of mind. So by state of mind, we mean, okay, if you're drunk, if you've had a lot of caffeine. So these are altered states of mind. You're in an altered state of mind with alcohol or caffeine. So if you study a lot and you drink a lot of caffeine when you study, then when you take the test, you should also drink caffeine. This is not true for alcohol. I'm not encouraging people to drink alcohol and study and then come to school drunk. That's a bad idea. The final thing is context cues. So context means like the space around you, the context you're in. So like you're in a classroom or you're outside in the woods, whatever your physical context is. When you learn something in one particular context, you're more likely to remember it when you're in that same context. So when you learn something in room 151, which is my room, you're going to remember it best when you're in that room again. So ideally, you would take the AP Psych exam in my room because you would have all these context cues. You would remember things like, oh, something happened in this part of the room and I remember it because of the context. So that would help you. So those are 3 things that sort of help you remember things. Mood congruent memories, state dependent memories, and context cues. Now, there are also some things that have to do with forgetting in memory. So when it comes to retrieval failure, there are 4 things that I want to go over. And those are proactive interference, retroactive interference, the misinformation effect, and source amnesia. Proactive interference and retroactive interference are really confusing. You learn one and then you get it confused with the other. The thing I recommend is just remembering that proactive interference is when prior information gets in the way of the learning of new information. So proactive prior. Example of that is once when I had a new girlfriend, I accidentally called her my old girlfriend's name. So the prior information, the old girlfriend's name, got in the way of learning the new girlfriend's name. You really want to avoid that, trust me. So retroactive is just the opposite. And I don't even try to tell you what the definition is. I'm not going to tell you. It's just the opposite of proactive. So if you remember proactive, you can always remember that retroactive is just the opposite. So the misinformation effect is when you incorporate wrong information into a memory. So we did a demonstration in class where somebody snuck into the room and stole my laptop. And afterwards I asked you what was in the person's hand. And when I did that, some of you created a memory and thought that something was in the hand, a ruler, a water bottle, but there was nothing in the person's hand. So so that's the misinformation effect. You incorporated the wrong thing because I sort of asked that leading question. The last thing is be quiet, be quiet. Is source. Will you shut that door? Don't let anybody in. The last thing is source amnesia, and this is when you remember the wrong source. So, if you remember that you were at this great party and it was a lot of fun, and you remember being there specifically, it's your memory. But in actuality, you weren't there. A friend of yours told you about the party. That would be source amnesia because the source of the memory is forgotten. You think it's your own actual presence at the party that's causing the memory, and in fact, it's just somebody told you that. So that would be source amnesia. So there it is. That's the wrap. That's my little memory video. And keep in mind this was not comprehensive. This is probably a third of the material you should know. But I think these were some of the more complex terms. So I hope you find that helpful. And bye-bye.